What if you could build a business that gives you the life of freedom you deserve? What if you could find the secrets to marketing, leadership, customer service, and other aspects of business that help you exceed your goals? What if you could walk away from your business for 30 days and it never misses a beat? That's what this podcast is for, to help business leaders like you find freedom from the day-to-day grind and start spending your time doing the things you love. I'm Levi McClendon, and my co-host is Josh Taylor, and this is the Cheers to Freedom podcast.
Hey, welcome to the Cheers to Freedom podcast. I am Josh Taylor with my host, Levi McClendon. Levi, how are you?
Doing well, Josh. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. And then we also have John Sproul with us. And John is with Camel Express Car Wash. He is the hiring and training director for Camel Express. And Levi, tell us why we wanted to have John on the podcast today.
Yeah,
by the way,
so
John, how are
welcome.
I'm good.
Yeah, let's welcome our guest, John Sproul, which we had introduced him. But John, thanks for jumping on a call today for this podcast. We appreciate it. I know it's a little loud where he's at, so we're trying to make this work. I don't hear any background right now, but he's at the wash. So, but anyway, John, thanks again for jumping on. So the purpose of this call, John, just so you even know, because we haven't really even talked before this podcast. That's kind of the way we like to roll here. It's just kind of, on the spot. Here we go. So I had reached out to Tyler, and a lot of you guys listening to this podcast know who Tyler Slaughter is with Camel Express. Pretty vocal, kind of the founder of Talk Car Wash, him and Blake. But anyway, I reached out and said, "Hey, Tyler, I am hearing a lot of problems out there with people being able to hire enough staff, right? Hire enough staff, keep those guys around." And when I talked to Tyler, he said, "Hey, we're not having that problem. We're actually overstaffed at times, right? So they're not really having that problem." I said, "Well, how are you doing that?" And I said, "I'd love to interview you and kind of see if we can help some other listeners out there." And he said, "Talk to John." So John, Tyler's definitely all about staying in your lane, and he does a good job of, "Hey, this is your role, this is your job, you do this, John." So he said, "Hey, reach out to John," which I did. So you are here today with us because we want to know the secret sauce that Camel Express uses to hire, train, retain those employees. Okay, so that's kind of where this podcast is going. But first of all, John, tell me a little bit about just your background. I really don't know. I mean, we know each other, just acquaintances, and we obviously talk quite a bit when we see each other. But John, a little of your history. Where are you from? Kind of, how did you get on with Camel? And what do how long you been there? What do you do?
Yeah. So currently, I'm the hiring and training director, but at Camel, I've been in that position for about a year and a half. But I started at another car wash in northern Indiana about 6 years ago, and it was just because a buddy just asked me, and I sort of was like bored with what I was doing. I just started as a baseline employee, and I was managing the site within about a year, and I sort of fell in love with it. But northern Indiana, my wife and I were ready for warmer weather, and so about 3 years into that, we moved down to Nashville, and I had known Tyler. Tyler and I had been talking about for a year, and I was just like reached out to him, and wasn't even trying to work for Camel. Just decided I wanted to turn car washing into a career, and I came on board as a manager in training at Camel. And when we were at one location, now we're like 3 going on, I don't know how many. And it's always been my passion from the beginning. From like probably 3 weeks into car washing, I was like, I want to be in charge of training. And I think my very first experience, I think most people in the car washing industry can associate with this, is that I came in, filled out my paperwork. Within 30 minutes of me walking in the door, I had my uniform on. They showed me, I watched someone load 2 cars, and then I was stuck on there, and we did like prepping as well. So I loaded a car. My very first car I ever loaded on came in too fast, broke a hubcap, wasn't listening to us, hopped the track, got back on the track, drove into the tunnel, and I was like, I never want anybody that works for me or with me ever to feel this ever again. And I was
Wow.
like, I'm going to do everything I possibly can to make sure that I invest into training, because I'm like, I want to quit. I don't like, and I was in my
Pretty
late
stressful.
20s, and I was like, man, as a high schooler, I'd go home and cry. Like, if this is
Yeah.
my first job, like it was. So that's where all my motivation is about.
So are you the one who actually did go to Tyler or, the team read there and say, hey, I think we need to do better training? Or how did this position, because honestly, I don't know. We work with a lot of car washes, and I don't know a lot of other car washes that have a full-time hiring and training employee. So how did this position come about?
So Tyler and Reed, Reed's the primary owner at Camel. They both saw, like, I told them right off the bat that I was interested in training, and they recognized, because I just basically I'm a bulldozer sometimes. I just came in and just started training people differently, and we had Tyler had a pretty we had a very documented training manual already. That was something that, like, I didn't have to develop. That was already well established. Um, it's just anybody and everybody sort of did the training, and so I just sort of came in, and I'm not very good at starting things, but I'm really good at making things better. And Tyler's really good at starting things, and so he started it and handed it off to me, and they are great. Both of them are great finding things that people are passionate about and be like, oh, this should be your job. You like doing this. Yeah. So that's sort of, it wasn't really, it sort of was just a natural progression. And I just tell people, I really enjoy telling people what to do and how to do it. So this was just a natural progression.
Well, and that's a sign of a good leader, a good owner there as well. They don't always know everything, but they know what needs to get done, and they bring the right people. Put them in the right position, on the bus in the right seat, and head in the right direction. That's what makes a very smooth operation. So obviously you got into this. You said it's been about a year, right, that you've been in this position. What as far as the hiring process goes and getting people right now to actually work, right? Like, what is the process that you guys use to bring on new employees? Where are you finding them? And that would be question one. And question two is how's your retention? How are you keeping people? Are you keeping people for a long period of time? And how do you do it?
Yeah. I think one of the key things is, there's a lot of components. One of the key things is in our first interview, very first interview I ever talked to employees, we ask, in my opinion, is the most important question is, why Camel? Like, what interests you in Camel? So we record those answers, and for people that are like, we know that, like, the number one answer for people that are not desirable for us is just because you're close. We're like, okay, cool. That's really not your, and like, that's the number one reason. But for people that are desirable for us, that actually we hire or at least get to the second interview, number one answer is how clean your site is. Number two answer is how happy your employees are. So we know those two things, so we focus on those two things.
That is, let me stop you there for just a second, because that is profound. Not one, that you're asking the question first, but you know what the answers are that you're looking for. And I think that's really important. We ask questions, we know what questions to ask, but a lot of times we don't always know what answer we actually want and what answer we don't want. So that is a great filtering process. So continue.
Yeah,
good
no,
on you.
and that's not even like retention. That's just the question to know like what gets people to apply, because we know that,
Mm,
I mean, most of the people that are applying are our customers already. So
mm,
we focus on, I mean, we have so many checklists about how clean the site is and well lit, and we are on top of making sure all our lights are functioning correctly, and because we know that has a direct impact on um, our applicants. And
Yes.
so,
then
John, let me
yeah.
ask you. Let me stop you right there, real quick. You just said that most of your applicants are actually customers. So, is that where you get most of your new hires? Is those that are customers?
Not necessarily that we end up hiring. I would say it's probably because some of them are members. Every once in a while, they're members, but a lot of times it's like, I've been through your wash before. That's how I know that you guys
Mm,
exist. Um, I or like I have a aunt or a parent that's a member. I've never been here, but this person told me about it because you have signs on your property or what, that kind of thing. Um,
gotcha.
uh,
Okay.
we're we're in the process of switching to a higher, like a better tracking, hiring applicant platform that's going to give us more detailed information on that. So
Can I ask you a
When
question real quick, going back to what you just said, and I know we want to move on to the rest of the process, but
yeah.
why those two answers? Why how clean your facilities are and how happy your employees are? Why are those the two answers that you're looking for?
Well, it's not necessarily that we're looking for them. Those are our top two answers that we get. So
Oh,
that's why we look for them now, because
okay.
that's the top two answers that people give us. So
Okay.
because that's the answer that we're hearing most often, we're like, that's what we need to focus on.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that since those are the answers, I mean, how incredible is that of Camel that that's your focus anyway? I've been to your locations. Josh has been to your locations. They're all extremely clean. They're well lit. The experience is the same at all of them. And so for a good hire, somebody, of the caliber of what you're looking for, the fact that they recognize that, if I'm in your shoes, you're like, yeah, they recognize that it's clean, well lit, people are smiling and happy. That's the environment that people want to look at or work at. And that's the environment where they're going to feel appreciated. They're gonna feel like they're welcome there, just like they are as a customer. In my opinion, I think that speaks volumes of Camel, and maybe that is the secret sauce, right? Maybe it's just the environment that you guys have created for your customers, and now the employees actually
Appreciate that as
enjoy
well.
working there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
not that is the secret sauce. So let me ask you this: where else? And I've got off track. I'm going to follow up on my other question. We talked about existing customers coming through. Where else do you guys? Oh, where else do you get new hires from? Like where do you advertise?
Yeah. So we advertise on site. Our biggest, our up until this point, our biggest thing was Indeed.
Okay.
But now we just made a switch to um, a platform we currently use Jazz HR. It just went live Monday,
Okay.
but we advertise on 26 job boards simultaneously.
Wow.
Um, and so that's helping. Like we're getting everything. We're getting Indeed. Uh, we're getting Google Jobs. I got a few of those just through our normal website. So it's tracking all of that. So I mean, you hear it a lot. Like the more information you get that you can track, then the more that you can focus on. So as the months go on, we'll probably see like what has a more of a focus. Like, we'll be able to track, are we getting more people from Indeed? But um, hands down, like Indeed has been good, but most
Okay.
of our people coming in have been uh, people that go by our sites.
One of the problems I hear, a big problem, are no shows, right? So somebody fills out an app, they're interested, and they don't show up for the interview and they're wasting people's time. What is your process to get people in the door? And are you seeing the same issues?
Um, Phone interviews are important. We have been doing walk-in interviews, just walk-ins. So I think first, what we did this on purpose. We wanted to lower the barrier to getting people in, because
Okay.
we needed people. So we just did walk-in Wednesdays, 10 a.m. to 2. It's an alliteration. It's really easy to remember, and it was just any of our employees. We wanted anyone to come through and just say, ask any employee. The employee knew, come in on Wednesday. They're walk-in interviews. You don't even have to fill in an application. But we're moving that process. We're choosing to be pickier now, and you have to fill out an application. You do a phone interview. So if they, I mean, we do that first interview, that phone interview, and if they don't answer, cool, okay, or they don't respond to us, then we haven't wasted any time. So we're making
And
that transition.
so you're not setting them, at least you're going to transition to that. But for now, you've lowered that barrier. It's really open. It's just, hey, come in anytime. It's a walk-in. What are they just allowed to walk around your site, talk to employees? Like, it sounds very informal, of more of just kind of a get to know us type interview. Is that kind of what that looks like?
No, there's a manager on site. They come in the office. They have a first
Okay.
interview sheet. Um, that's basically what you would see, and it's really quick. It's meant to be 5 minutes. It just gets them in the door.
Do you do
And it's
multiple people at one time? Like, could there be, since it's open 10 to 2, would you have 2 or 3 people come in and be there together, or do they actually have separate times that you would want to talk with them?
Potentially. Usually what we've done up to this point, it's one at a time because they're so quick. We're just like, why don't you just wait? We're just getting their information. Um, just seeing if they're worth a second interview, and a lot of times they aren't. So, and again, it's inefficient at scale. So we'll eventually
Mm,
do the same process but phone interviews. So
okay. Good to know. So they come in the first time. Obviously, if you do like them, you set something up for an actual, more of an official interview, and then that's the process and flow. So you were not super impressed with the initial loading experience rodeo that you had.
no.
So you have since implemented what is so now when somebody is hired on, you don't have to go through all the details, but I'm assuming that there is a much, probably better process. So when somebody comes on, they don't go through that same thing. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah. And when I came to Camel, it was already pretty well established.
Hmm.
We've just gotten better at it. The thing is we've noticed. So one, when we have an applicant come in, we need to, and we tell the managers, like, we need to know what we are looking for in an employee. Um, and that's how they fit our culture and all that kind of stuff. And we have that defined. Um, and then we also don't be afraid to be picky. Like, that's another thing is it's so common. Like, everyone's just like looking for people, and it's really easy. Like, don't lower your standards, just to get a body and so the same way is that we need to know what the employee is looking for, because
Right.
so often in this process we're just like, well, it's what we need, but not what the employee needs. And yes, everybody will say, most people will say, I like to do whatever I want, but like, deep down people want structure, not too much structure. You got to find that fine balance. So having a plan. So that's why um, we have like a progression chart, like for their promotions and that kind of stuff. We have a plan of how they're training. We're like, this is what you're doing on day one. This is what you're doing on day two. We use a digital training platform. We use Trainual. It's amazing. Just any kind of training manual is important, but making it digital so they can access it anywhere, anytime. So that structure, they really enjoy that. And it's something that, like, now you have to make sure you don't go overboard and it's not micromanaging, but having that structure and showing them that you have a plan and that you're not just shooting from the hip makes them
Yeah.
feel more confident and makes them want to stick around.
I've seen that journey. I've seen that in your office, and I've seen it online, and it's been posted. And I think it's genius. I think right now, for the listeners that are out there, if you haven't seen it, we'll have to get it for you, or maybe it's posted somewhere. But it's awesome. It shows you from the day you get there, kind of the curve, like where you could go, and to show them that this could be an actual more of just an entry level. This could be a career choice. Like you could actually be site manager someday. You could potentially, like the levels that you can go, and for them to visually see that and see that plan, I think is a great idea. And if you're not doing it, that's something that should be done. Sorry, Josh, you were going to say something.
Yeah, well, I think one thing that you said that was really important is telling your managers to be picky. Don't hire somebody just because you need a body in there, because the reality is that can do a lot more damage in the future. I see a lot of businesses just hiring people just so they can have somebody there. The problem is that can potentially cause you to lose your good employees, because there's nothing that frustrates good employees than bad employees. And a lot of times bad employees, if they don't fit the culture, they don't often stick around very long. But if they do, they can cause your good employees to leave, and now you're in a bigger mess than you were. So I think that was a really important piece of advice there. How long, say I'm a new employee that came in, I got hired on, how long is the training process for you guys?
13 shifts.
13 shifts. Cool.
Yeah, it may be a little longer for part-time because their shifts aren't like a high school student. Their shifts aren't always 8 hours.
And is it you that's doing the training, or is it multiple different types of people doing it?
So we love enabling our managers. So let's say a site manager that fully knows, site manager, assistant managers that fully know how to do training. They should be able to, we have it all set up that they should be able to do it themselves, unless like I'm there. Of course, I'm around to help new managers. I'm also there if they're just um, maybe scheduling, the way the scheduling works. Maybe I'm there to just to help out. Also, our system is set up to we can do training for multiple people at one time, but I need to step in. So we've done this before at one of our locations. We've hired 3 people at once just because we were experiencing some growth, and didn't matter how experienced the manager was, the manager couldn't do 3 people once. But our system is set up for it, so I step in and I help those days, and so that's where it's set up. So I'm there as sort of guiding. I'm writing all the training, but I'm not necessarily there every time. But if I'm available and I see this person's onboarding, I'll pop in because I want to be able to meet them, and they see me. Especially, I'm in a lot of the videos, so they'll see my face, they'll recognize me. Especially too, as the leadership, as part of our leadership team, Tyler and I are big on we want to know all the employees. We want them to know us and feel comfortable seeing us around.
So I recently read The Power of Moments by Chip and Dan Heath, actually recommended by Josh on one of our podcasts. And there was one example, John, that they gave about new hires, right? Where they were talking about the moments that people remember. And a lot of times we remember the first day on a job, right? We remember, this is a shift. This is a transition in my life.
Like when you load a car and he pops off the track.
Exactly. You'll never forget that. Whether it's good or bad, you're going to remember it. And so one of the recommendations, and they gave kind of they gave a true story about 2 different companies. One of them that would hire somebody and they'd bring him in, and it was like, oh, here's your desk. They didn't introduce him to anybody. They had a monitor hooked up with a broken Ethernet cord. It was just like, hey, here you are. Here's your desk. Good luck. And then they would not really even introduce you. And then the other example was, making this the best day that this person has had, taking them around, introducing them, showing them, the ropes, right? And making them feel important. And so I really thought, man, it's a really good idea to make that person's first day the best day that they're going to have, make them feel important, make them feel seen and cared for. I think that would go a long way. So I did like that part of that book. And it sounds like, John, that's something that you're obviously implementing, is having, here's the plan, here's what we're doing. Getting to know you, Tyler, some of the other people, I think is probably pretty critical. So,
John,
well, another thing.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to add something to that. So one thing I'm really passionate about is, so what's one thing that if you ask any employee, anyone that works anywhere, you ask them what their most boring thing they've ever done, it's always going to be reading the policy handbook. Like, it's just, but it's something that you have to do. And you it's pretty much the first thing you have to do.
It's almost like
So
reading the terms and
it's one
conditions
of those,
page.
I know. So we thought about it and like, why in the world are we having new employees, people that where it used to be that 90% or the first 90 days was when majority of people left the company. Now it's more like the first 2 weeks. And so why should be the very first thing that they do is do the most boring thing they will ever do.
That's a really good point.
So
that's awesome.
So that's why we with our digital training, we put in gifts, fun things. So, for example, we have a section on our in our in our
training
handbook,
manual,
in our handbook that specifically talks about like dress code, and it has a section on the length of your fingernails because again, we're dealing with cars, can't have your fingernails too long, and it talks about the length and that kind of stuff. And we put a comment in there. We're like, we're not going to be measuring your fingernails like when you come in, but if you come in looking like Wolverine, we're gonna have a talk. And I literally have a video of Wolverine's claws coming out, and I love being in there when they're reading that because they all like I love at the end they're usually laughing and I'm like, they've read a policy manual. Who has ever read a policy manual was like laughing at the end of it.
Right.
And so that's what our goal is. And we want to make it memorable, even when it's something that's relatively boring.
That's a really great idea. One of the things that you mentioned in there real quick was, you could have it to where they read the manual and then they take a quiz, and if they do get a certain score on the quiz after reading that section or something, that they get a $5 Starbucks gift card or something like that. Like, give people incentive to read it and study it and know it. And it does gamify it a little bit rather than just it's such a great point of why should the first thing they do be the most boring thing on the job. So that's a really great point.
So John, really good stuff so far. Quick, obviously what I want to know is, why do people stay at Camel? What is the number one reason that people enjoy working for you guys?
So I think a common question that we would always ask, and you hear this said all the time, culture, 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 culture. Well, we would always be asking our managers, like, whether it was in the hiring process, whether it was like in reviews, we would ask them, would they fit the culture? Well, I realized I'm like, we don't really have that defined anywhere. Like, what does the culture mean? Tyler and I know exactly what it means, but it's really hard to define it. So I sort of went on this quest of like, how can I define this? How do we define what we're looking for to make? Because again, like, we want to make sure that everyone's working with people that they want to. It's so ambiguous. So one of the books that I've read in the past and I love is called The Ideal Team Player, by Patrick Lencioni.
Yep.
And he's written so many good business books. And the fact that the first like 2/3 of it is just a story. So we are starting at the top up with their leadership, going down our site managers, assistant managers. Everybody's reading this book, and it's specifically talks about we're looking for somebody that's humble, hungry, and smart, like people smart. And that's what's defining things for us. And we've seen a shift, and now we're like, and it's not something we read this book and okay, then we move on to the next thing. It's like, we started reading this back in October, and I haven't every single meeting. It hasn't gone to everybody. We haven't started talking about it yet with our CSA, our base employees yet, our CSAs, but every manager meeting, like it comes up and I'm like, this isn't going away. This is who we are. This is what we're looking for. We're looking for someone that's humble, hungry, and smart. And we've noticed our turnover has been dropping. Like we are just our connections and I think the important thing is to know what you're looking for, and also to always be like have avenues so people can give you feedback
Yeah.
and make changes based on it, because we know what we're looking for, but we're not perfect. Um, we have very open communication, but every month at our staff meetings, um, we use something called Jolt, and it sends out a personal list to every employee, and they basically give us feedback on managers, on leadership, on anything. And so the first of every month, from the first to the fifth, we get all of these things back, and sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, and it's just like, okay, cool, like, oh gosh, this is a giant fire we need to put out. And like we respond really quickly to that, and I think they see that, they're like, oh, okay, like I think that shows that we care. And there's all these little tiny things that you guys can do, and benefits, and there's all that kind of stuff. And it's hard because there's so many different things, and it's not something that like it's not just one thing. But I
Right.
think it comes
Yeah.
but I think it comes down to know what you're looking for and like ask for feedback and respond to it.
That's
So
go ahead. I wanted to say one thing about that book real quick. The Ideal Team Player. I love that you guys are reading that, especially from the top down, because that's such a great way to do that. It's also a great book for people that are looking for a job. So, if there are people that are listening to this, because I know, like, even looking through Talk Car Wash, there's a lot of car wash managers that are looking for different sites and stuff. It's a great book to read as you're preparing to look for a job or be hired on somewhere, because it does show you how to be that ideal team player, but it also shows you guys that are the directors and owners of what you're looking for in an employee. And one of the things that you guys are so good at, and we got to see it while we were there. We've seen it through just how you guys celebrate on Instagram, but you are so good at celebrating wins with your team and your employees. And I think that speaks volumes. Like, you guys, you're it's not about the bottom line for you guys. It's about people, and it's very obvious there. Go ahead, Levi.
well, and to kind of piggyback on that, as far as making people feel valuable. So, John, I've heard you say, people say it's clean. People are happy here. We give them a roadmap. You give them feedback. You're working on this culture and whatnot. But the one thing that I haven't heard that comes up all the time is the pay rate. You haven't mentioned pay one time. Where do you guys pay when it comes to, I'm curious, when it comes to your market, and it's becoming more and more competitive in your space, and how important is that pay rate? You haven't really focused on it, but where are you at in the space, and how important is that on maybe a scale of 1 to 10? Where do you rate pay rate for?
Yeah, so I think as long as you're paying them a livable wage, like paying them what they're worth, basically, then pay doesn't matter. Now, of course, if you're paying them, that doesn't mean you should be paying the minimum wage. I'm not saying that at all. But right now, it's always the question of like, well, just we got to pay them more. We got to pay them more. I'm like, well, at some point, you got to offer these other things, and there's a reason why, on average, like each month last year, on average, 4 million people were quitting their jobs, and a lot of people were talking, well, we can't find anybody. It's they're because of they're wanting to stay home on because of all the benefits for unemployment, and like that's some of the reason, but that's not the main reason.
Right.
People and all these people aren't quitting their jobs because they're not getting paid enough. It's because I think with everything with the pandemic, I think it's shown employees that there's other things more valuable than just pay.
Yep.
Their mental health, their benefits, and how the company cares for them. And I think employees are changing what they're looking. These candidates are changing what they're looking for and how much they'll put up with before they leave.
Yep.
But we haven't seen any changes from employers.
Yeah.
So for us, we start at, like, right now it's we start at $12 an hour. But here's another thing: we get $1 raise if you finish your training. So we directly tie that in, and
Smart.
they can get that in as little as 2 weeks. And then once they pass their certification, so they're certified. Every level of uh, our progression management, any of that has to get a certification, and they get another $1 raise with that. So that's really big. They not only do they get accomplished and basically recognized in front of everybody, they also get a pay raise with that, and that helps. And of course, we do commissions, and it's all that kind of stuff. And now we offer like health insurance and 401k with company match. So that stuff's great. But like, there's little things where it's not just about money. Money is important, but it's not just about money. We have a fully stocked snack cabinet, and the thing is like a bunch of our employees recently got raises at this site that I'm currently at in the past week. Not a single one has brought that up. All of them are talking. We tried new snacks, and we like doubled their snack amount. Every single employee is talking about, every day in the past 5 days have talked about how good the snack cabinet is. That's what they're talking about. They're not talking about the raises that they got.
Yeah. Well, and that's such a good point, John. And we'll kind of wrap it up here. I'll let Levi finish it off. But what I think the last 2 years has shown us is the world changed, and a lot of us have seen the world change over the last 10, 15, 20 years. The corporate world has changed. The problem is corporations didn't change with it. And so they're trying to do business and do employees and everything else like they've been doing it for 40 or 50 years. And that's just not the way that this generation does work. And so you've got to realize that, a lot of people, when they hear, the term millennial, they think of 20-year-olds, but, the oldest millennial today is 40 years old. And so the 40-year-olds that are working for you are millennials. They see the world differently. And 40-year-old millennials versus 30-year-old millennials see the world differently too, because they're having different life experiences. But overall, in general, they're seeing the world differently than the boomers, even than Generation X. And the problem is we're trying to treat them like they're still 50, 60-year-olds, that the world was just different. And millennials are all about purpose. We're all about mission. We're all about that culture. We're all about people. And it's not the driving focus is not always money. It is what you guys are really building there at Camel, which is obvious that it's becoming successful.
Yeah, I love that he said that the top level guys are changing, right? You got to change that perspective. So I was going to comment on that as well, because so many of us get, this is the way it is, this is the way it was, and this is the way we're going to do it. Well, good luck, because that's just not the world today. And it's
millennials
okay.
Don't care about getting Rolex watches, when you get to retire.
And that's okay. We have to be okay with them being different. It's how do we manage them differently? How do we bring them on? How do we make them feel cared for? And I think those are the questions people need to be asking, and they need to be answering that with the people they're bringing on. So John, we'll wrap this up, man. I really appreciate your time that you've taken out of your busy schedule. And I want to thank Tyler for letting me steal you here for a little bit to help those out there in this car wash space, and any space for that matter. But I'd like to ask you one more quick question. We always like to kind of end our podcast with kind of just maybe a quick tip, or just some advice to some of these owners out there. Is there one piece of information, that kind of a practical piece, that you might recommend some of these car wash owners and managers doing to bring on, those great employees and try to keep them longer?
Yeah, I would say, like, again, knowing what you're looking for, knowing what the end goal is. So often we're doing this thing where we're just like, well, we need to have people in. Well, like, what's your purpose? And like, what you're trying to do. And also, like, I think with that, what helps you accomplish that is know what your personal purpose is. So, like, my purpose in being at Camel, and I tell this to our guys on a daily basis, is that whether someone's at Camel for 3 months, 3 years, or 30 years, is that they leave a better person than when they walked in that door. And everything I'm doing as in the realm of hiring and training is trying to accomplish that purpose. And so it's, yeah, so all of that, and just
That's
I
solid.
can only do that by knowing what my end goal is, and that's what my end goal. I'm trying to make a lasting impression on and change the lives for the better. And like it's one of those, I want all of our employees, everyone at Camo, at the end of the day, go, is my life better for John being a part of it? Is my life better for Camel being a part of it? And if the answer is I don't know, or the answer is no, then we need to do something different. And yeah,
That's good.
That's awesome.
Well, cool. Well, John, we appreciate it. And I think that
thanks, guys. This was a blast.
Yeah, well, we're so glad that you jumped on. As Levi said, we appreciate the time that you invested here with us. And if you're listening and have any questions, comment wherever you're listening to this. Reach out to us because we really think that this is so important, and this is what we're seeing so much in the space. We're in the middle of the Great Resignation, is what they're calling it, and so there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of people looking for jobs. Yeah. While there's a lot of people looking for employees. And so there's a lot of opportunity here. And I think, John, you kind of laid out some great advice as we capitalize on these opportunities. So really great interview. And thank you guys that are listening. Thank you for listening.